If you're going to Celtic Park, then why not visit the Paradise Bar, where you can find live music before every game. The friendly staff will serve you your favourite tipple at competitive prices. So get yourself along to the Paradise Bar, 65 Tollcross Road, just down from Parkhead Cross and 2 minutes from the stadium. Free function hire is also available. The Paradise Bar. Cheers.
Hi, I'm Billy Noel. Welcome to Desert Island Tim's. Today's guest is Europe's most sought-after sports artist, whose work has raised millions for charity and has also won him many awards. Jim Scullion, how are you, sir?
Not bad, Billy.
Right, Jim, what was life like for you growing up?
As a kid, it was great. What I can remember about it was really brilliant. I spent the biggest chunk of my life up to my teenage years living with my grandfather, who was an old Irishman who died in his 90s when I was 16, who could neither read nor write up until the day he died. But he was probably the biggest influence in my life, and I love my life with all the things he's taught me over the years. So it was great. We lived just facing Albion Rovers football park, and from an early age I could stand on the table in the living room and watch both goals at either end, but I couldn't see the middle of the park. But I saw all the goals in the games. And every Saturday me and a couple of pals would stand on the table and my granddad would run in and out with pieces and jam and stuff for us, and we watched the footballs in the comfort of our own home, standing on the table in the living room. It was a great life. I was born in the 50s, and things were a bit different then from they are now. Nobody cared if you went out at 9 o'clock in the morning and you came back in at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night to get your bath and into bed for school the next morning. So we were always out doing something, up to some kind of mischief. The big football thing for us was on a Saturday as we get bigger, was trying to get into the Rovers without paying. And we would climb over the wall. I remember every Friday night my father would come up and him and my grandfather and I would go to the pictures. And then it was always war films or cowboy films. And that stayed with me. I'm a big John Wayne fan. I still love cowboy films. But I remember seeing, it wasn't The Great Escape, but it was a similar film about an escape. It may have been Colditz or something like that. So then decided to dig under the kind of tin fence that went round Albion Rovers Park. And so we actually had a wee tunnel under the fence that we could get into the park. And basically, we never saw the first half of a game ever, because the police chased us round and round the park and threw us out, and we'd get in again and they'd throw us out again. And then at half time they opened the gates and you could get in for nothing. And we walked in and the police just kind of growled at us because there was nothing they could do. I remember my first big event at Albion Rovers was getting in at the beginning of a game where Jim Kennedy, Celtic, was going to be playing for Morton. It was his first game for Morton. I was desperate to see him. And actually, as they were about to kick off and the referee just blew the whistle, I ran on with a bit of paper to get an autograph. And I think it's probably the only game that's ever in Scottish football that was restarted. Jim Kennedy looked at me, looked at the referee, and he said, "Give him it, hurry up." And I signed the thing. They turned to look at the police. There only was one police, and he was eating a pie at the time, and looked over and kind of shrugged. And I ran off to applause from the crowd. Brilliant. And the game was restarted. So that was a big event for me. When Celtic won the European Cup, a lot of people from Coatbridge will remember this, but others won't. I was interviewed on Sky Television once, and they asked me to pick my favourite games of all time. And every game I gave them, we couldn't find film of it, and this was one of them. When Celtic won the European Cup, the first game they played was against Albion Rovers. In a closed gate match, and there must have been 20,000 at it, and we all went over the walls. In the end they opened the gates to let us in, and that was quite something to see the players up close in a small park. And I remember having a kind of souvenir magazine that I got from, he sent away items to the Daily Record. I got this coloured magazine, Celtic Triumphant, and getting all the autographs. And when the game finished, I had virtually the whole squad, not just the 11 that played, and I had Jock Stein's autograph on it as well. There was only one player that wasn't on it, and that was my hero. And he didn't play in Lisbon. I'm not going to say his name because of what happened, but he came out the ground and I followed him across to the car park, asking him to sign this, and Ronnie Simpson was with him, and Bertie Auld. I kept asking, and he just ignored me. And we got to his car, because the players came in their car, they didn't come in a bus. He took the book off me and threw it away and shoved me to the ground. I remember Ronnie Simpson kind of rearing up with him, and Bertie Auld, and wee Bertie picked me up and says, right, you're all right, son. Lifted up my book and signed it. So to this day I've got Bertie Auld's signature in it twice,
Right.
And that's the reason it's there twice. The guy was never my hero again, and although I know him now very well, and I've told him the story again and he can't remember it. I'm very pally with wee Bertie, and he remembers it. But I wouldn't say who it was. It's not fair. It's probably just caught him at a bad moment. Yeah. But it was great living there in Coatbridge at that time. We didn't have a TV. We listened to the radio. And my love of music came from that time as well, because we would put on the wireless, or for those of you who don't know, that's the radio, and listen to anything that was on the radio. And we listened to the news at night, and then the Man in Black would tell a horror story, and I listened to that. And sometimes we could tune in to other channels if we played about with it. And occasionally you could get the Grand Ole Opry that went out to American servicemen overseas, which was brilliant. You could hear Hank Williams and stuff like that. That was my introduction to music as well. But it was also my introduction to football, because Celtic was on the radio virtually every week. So I heard them before I ever saw them, and I think that was a big influence to me. And at night, when the radio was finished, my granddad would have a wee bottle of stout every night. I would have a ginger beer. The light was off. He'd put the light on in the bedroom, because he'd say, go and put that big light on to heat the room up. So we'd put the light on in the bedroom to heat the room up. And we'd sit at the side of the fire, and they would tell me stories about Ireland and all sorts, and then sing a few songs. And I think that's where my love of music comes from as well. It stays with you over the years.
Fantastic. So that takes us into your first song.
Takes us to our first song perfectly. It's Skibbereen. It's the song my grandfather used to always sing. If you were ever at a party, or every New Year, it was neighbours all coming in, and there were a big sing-song, and my grandfather always sang Skibbereen. And Ronnie Drew, I'm a great lover of the Dubliners, the original Dubliners, who are most of all no longer with us, sadly. And I was fortunate enough to meet Ronnie Drew and Luke Kelly and that over the years. And Ronnie Drew, for me, was the closest that I could think of my granddad actually singing it. It sounds like him. So it's Ronnie Drew singing Skibbereen.
Oh, Father dear, and I often hear you speak of Erin's Isle. Her lofty scenes, her valleys green, her mountains rude and wild. They say it is a lovely land, wherein a prince might dwell. Then why did you abandon it? Oh, the reason to me tell. My son, I loved my native land with energy and pride, till a blight came over all my crops, and my sheep and cattle died. The rents and taxes were to pay, and I could not them redeem, and that's the cruel reason I left old Skibbereen. 'Tis well I do remember the bleak November day, when the bailiff and the landlord came to drive us all away. They set the roof on fire with their cursed English spleen, and that's another reason I left old Skibbereen. Oh, your mother, too, God rest her soul, lay on the snowy ground. She fainted in her anguishing, seeing the desolation round. She never rose, but passed away from life to immortal dreams, and that's another reason I left old Skibbereen. Oh, you were only 2 years old, and feeble was your frame. I could not leave you with my friends, for you bore your father's name. I wrapped you in my coat the more, at the dead of the night unseen. And I heaved a sigh, and I said goodbye to dear old Skibbereen. Oh, well, Father dear, and the day will come when on vengeance we will call. And Irishmen, both stout and tall, will rally unto the call. I'll be the man to lead the van beneath the flag of green, and loud and high we'll raise the cry, revenge for Skibbereen.
Right, Jim, what took you into the world of art?
Well, again, that's something that goes right back to very early in my childhood. As I said, with no telly or anything, so what I had to do was you had to find your entertainment somewhere else. There were no computers or laptops or anything like that then. So I think the most sophisticated game was something like Snakes and Ladders, or if you knew a toff that stayed 2 or 3 streets away that had Monopoly and a leather ball. That's what you aspire to.
Aye.
I remember my granddad, when people sent you Christmas cards, he would keep them.
Aye.
And Christmas cards at that time were all folded. You could actually fold them out into like an A4 sheet or an A3 sheet, and they'd be kept for me and all piled up in a cupboard, and I would draw on them. And that was probably my main pastime, was sitting drawing. He'd tell stories and I'd sit and draw and try and draw the stories he was telling me.
Yeah.
And I remember at an early age listening to Celtic on the radio, listening to David Francie. And David Francie was quite a character. Nobody does it now on radio. They commentate on games, but all they do is tell you what's happening on the park, whereas David Francie described the scene.
Yeah.
And he went from everything to guys eating pies and people selling spearmint chewing gum, and he would describe the day, the clouds, the weather, and the atmosphere, and I would sit and draw it. I'd try and draw the goals that I just heard on the radio. And when the Sunday papers came in, I would read them out to my grandfather. We always started at the back, and I'd read the reports of the papers out to the games out to him. And then we'd get a blue pen and draw in the Rangers strips blue and a green pen. You remember years ago you could get this kind of, I suppose this was the iPod of the day, or the iPad of the day, was a pen with 4 colours in it.
Aye.
So you had red, green, yellow and blue, and I now know those 4 colours will make any colour, but I didn't then. So the Aberdeen strips were coloured in red, the Celtic strips, we got the green. Our newspaper by a Sunday night was all in colour, using these pens, and I think every pocket money I got spent on these multicoloured pens. You also get torches that did the same. You could change the colour of the torch. That just popped into my head there. That was very entertaining at night when you were trying to read a comic, because you could read it in different colours. But that's how I get started in art, or started drawing. I think most kids do it. I work a lot with kids now, and I think it's brilliant that kids actually, they have no fear when they're painting. It's like anything, they have no fear when they start out. It's somewhere along the line somebody knocks that out of you, or discourages you, or sends you off in another direction. And it didn't happen with me. My grandfather and my father, they encouraged what I did. And I suppose it's similar to people nowadays sticking pictures on a fridge. They had them on the mantelpiece and stuck around the house. So at school I used to draw every opportunity I got. I loved it. I loved painting and drawing. And it was something I always done. When I got to secondary school, my dream was to be an artist. I wanted to paint. But I grew up in an era where working class people didn't sing. You can't be a musician, because I played the guitar at the time as well, and the banjo. And no, that's okay for fun, but it's not a real job. You can't be an artist. Who do you know that's an artist? And what families wanted for you then was a job as an insurance man, or a job with a shirt and tie. Yeah. That's the way it was described to me, get a job with a shirt and tie. And to be fair, my grandfather didn't want that for me. He wanted me to do what I wanted to do and put everything into it. And at the end of the day, I was put out of art at school. I wrote a book last year.